Hello, everybody. Adam Parks here with another episode of Receivables podcast. Today, I'm here with yet another industry legend, Mr. Dave Pauken, who is the CEO of Convoke, who is really been on the forefront of some of the technology moves that have driven our industry over the last 15 years. But Dave, thank you so much for coming on and joining me today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights.
You're welcome, Adam. Thanks for having me on your program today.
Well, I got to say, you've got one of the most interesting backgrounds, I think, in the space. And this always is my favorite part of the podcast, learning where people came to the debt collection industry from. For anyone who has not heard this story before, can you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got to the seat that you're in today?
Sure. Happy to tell the story. I graduated college. I was an accountant. Went to work for this old accounting firm called Arthur Andersen. Was there for a long time, a dozen years. And it was time to leave the firm, Adam, and I was looking for a job. And I got a job at a startup that was started by a college dropout in Bethesda, Maryland, and it was a marketing services firm. I went there to work there as the chief accountant, and the company took off and it went public on the New York Stock Exchange. And this founder was Dan Snyder, who later acquired the Washington Redskins. That company went public. And at the time, Dan was the youngest CEO ever on the New York Stock Exchange, later eclipsed by Mark Zuckerberg. That company, Snyder Communications, took off. It grew to billions in revenue. And we eventually sold it to a company called Havas, a French ad agency. He bought the Redskins. He asked me to join him there as the chief operating officer. I didn't grow up as a huge sports fan or football fan, but here I fell into this job that people spend their life trying to get. And so here I was in sports entertainment. So I was there for 6 years as the chief operating officer, and learned a lot about sports. It's really a business, contrary to what some people might think. You still have revenue you got to grow and customers you have to serve and a product that you have to put on the field. So that's where I learned my business chops. And after some time, I left. It was time to do something different, and I wanted to get into technology. And I became the CEO of a local energy technology company here in the Washington area. It was owned by some venture capitalists, grew that, sold it, and then some investors who had invested into Convoke asked me to come run this new startup. And the original business model had challenges to it. There were uncertain times in 2010, and me and a couple of my partners eventually bought the business and restarted it into what it's become today. So that's how I got to where I am.
So, Convoke is a really common name across the industry. You're always well represented. You're always at the shows and the conferences, and it's just a very common phrase. But I don't know that everybody truly understands the storyline of this organization and the original business model as compared to how you've pivoted. And ultimately, I would like to talk about what you're seeing over the next 5 years, because I think you've had a great vision in the time that you've been managing that organization. So I'm curious to see what you're starting to think about over the next couple of years as well.
Shall I give you the origins and then?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning of the storyline and we'll work our way through.
Okay, so the origin was there was a couple of debt buyers who were collection attorneys and debt buyers up in Michigan, and they had a problem getting media, and they were buying debt. And so the idea was, hey, this thing called the cloud was new back then. Can we take the media and put it in the cloud? And whoever has permissible purpose to the account could get access to it. That was fundamentally the idea. So coders were hired, friends and family raised money, and we built a platform where media could go into the cloud. And if you could demonstrate that you owned the account, you could get access to the media. And we were fortunate enough to get a first customer, which was a large bank. And we were able to prove out the model and that it actually worked. Interestingly, so the original idea was just solving the media problem for debt sales. I can stop there and let you ask a question or just.
So, I mean, look, I was living through it. I was buying debt around the time when giant Ryder trucks full of documents would show up and we had to bring in someone to scan it. So, I mean, I was there at the beginning of this and had an opportunity. I mean, that was a major step in the industry going to a new level and being able to manage things in bulk. The idea of digitizing media changed the debt buying industry forever. I remember at that time thinking about it and looking at the challenges of the cloud, because at the time nobody trusted really putting anything into the
The
cloud. It was
cloud.
such a new concept. Even the terminology was really new.
Yeah.
How you got a major creditor to pioneer that with you, I think one has really helped to stake something in the ground that said this is a trustworthy service. But I can only imagine how difficult that lift must have been to get that first group on board.
Yeah, it was very difficult. They fortunately had a big problem and needed a solution, and so they
Fair
were willing
statement.
to take a chance on us. Sometimes, when the pain is bad enough, you're willing to maybe look at something you otherwise wouldn't do to make a change, and they did. The challenge we had after that, though, Adam, you may recall back from those years that a lot of credit issuers actually stopped selling debt altogether, and so we were struggling there for a while. But then the regulators said that credit issuers became responsible for the activities of a third-party debt collector.
Mhm.
And that happened, I think, in 2012. And that created an immediate overnight problem for a credit issuer. How are they going to oversee what these third parties are doing if they're responsible? And so what we did was we took the product were successfully getting media from a credit issuer to a third party. What if we just sort of flipped it on its head and got information from a third party and made it available to a credit issuer? So that's how we evolved to help solve the oversight problem that the industry faced pretty urgently in the early years.
In that 2012, 2014 timeframe is the same timeline that we created ComplyArm, with the purpose of doing the same thing, but doing it from the perspective of complaints, disputes, and being able to move that data back and forth. We ended up selling that company to Pravana in 2019
Okay.
because
Yeah.
it was a big problem. I mean, being able to understand, now all of a sudden you're responsible for all of these third party vendors. You can't stop collecting. That revenue is expected in the bottom line, and that's, it's in their financial reports, and that is a direct drive on profitability. So to just cut debt collection or litigation out was almost impossible. But the technologies, not only to, let's say, managing a legal network, there was a lot of challenges in getting the documentation back and forth between these organizations. So it sounds like you had some of the right infrastructure technology at the right time to actually be able to execute on.
Yeah. One of our strategies that we were trying to bring to the industry which was very difficult for them to absorb these regulatory changes, providing media, doing oversight. And what we wanted to try to educate our customers on is that, hey, technology can be your friend. We don't have to stop collecting. We can still collect. Let's just bring some technology tools to satisfy the changing regulatory environment. Some collectors stopped, right? Some law firms went out of business or agencies stopped. We all saw that. But we tried to educate that, hey, you can still collect. It's okay to do that under this new regime. That brought us into the field of data. So we were good with media, and then we started capturing this data. And we found ourselves working alongside the recovery management systems of large financial institutions. The large recovery management systems were good at placements and recalls and balance tracking, but all of these oversight and media tools they didn't have. And so we found ourselves working alongside these systems. And so the way things have evolved here coming up to 2015, we see credit issuers wanting a modern recovery management tool that allows them to do inventory management, that allows them to track balances, that manages their media, that gets them the information for the oversight in a one-stop shop. And then now that we're in this area of AI over the last 2023, can I have business intelligence to help me be more compliant, have higher productivity, and better performance, collecting more money? Those
Right.
three things: compliance, productivity, performance.
Centralizing those disparate systems is the only way to structure the data to be able to learn for what's coming in the future. So it sounds like you've taken this natural evolution to really providing an ancillary service to starting to provide the primary software or that consolidation of all of those different data points. Your standard debt collection software wasn't really built for the purpose of managing third parties, right? It was built for collection agencies to manage themselves, and banks would deploy something similar for their own collection efforts. But that's not always the infrastructure that you're looking for to be able to go out to third parties and to manage those other relationships, right? Because the flow of litigation data requirements is different than the flow of collections is different than if we were to sell accounts, and how all that starts to look from a consulting standpoint. I've never worked at the banks, but having worked with some of the banks from a consulting standpoint, that was always an issue, was that their loan management system isn't built for collections, and either they don't have something and they were using spreadsheets and old school technology. But starting to structure all of that data in 2015 is really insightful going into where we are now in 2023, because if the data is not structured, it's not valuable,
It's
right?
not valuable. Yeah. It's a good point on the channels that you're bringing up, Adam, because a credit issuer, as you point out, has three choices ahead of them. They can sell the debt, they can use an agency, they can hire a law firm, or I guess they can work it internally. They've got four choices before them. And we try to be the tool to help them. If they want to go external to one of those third parties, debt sales, agency, or legal, they're in one platform.
Well, they should always be attacking at least one or more of those. Because if you look back at the old Bill Bartman days, when the banks had limited themselves to only debt sales, they were overly reliant that cash flow through one organization. And when that
Mhm.
organization didn't exist anymore, they had to go rebuild all of their recovery network. So I would think that a large creditor should be looking quite closely at having all four of those channels running simultaneously. And you should be able to pull your levers and move your volume
Yeah.
back and forth and champion
Yeah.
challenge. But if you're just collecting internally and you're not comparing yourself to a third party,
Yeah.
I've always found that banks are really good at like underwriting and performing loan servicing. But when it comes to debt collection, like it really does require specialized strategies and services. Now, look, I think the line has become blurred because anybody can send out a text message, anybody can send out an email these days. But the differentiator is in the strategies, it's in the content and in the strategies. It's not in the ability to send a text message or email. So
Right.
being able to specialize portfolio volume in a way in which it's being worked by those with the highest degree of certainty in collecting it, I mean, that feels like it's a natural fit for even a mid-sized creditor.
Absolutely. A mid-sized creditor, even, smaller credit unions, any organization that's got past due debt, they have a responsibility to try to collect it. It's all part of our credit system here in the US, and they need to have tools to be able to do it efficiently and effectively.
And if they can't collect it, what are the options? They can raise interest rates or they can make credit less available. They've only got two levers to pull.
That's it. And neither of those are good options. Yeah.
No, not for the consumer or
Yeah,
for the
and
bank or for the investor or for the bank.
your point on champion challenger, that's historically been hard to do. It's been sort of a manual data accumulation effort to try to compare one strategy to another. But in the day and age that we live in today, with some of the technologies that exist out there through companies like Databricks and Click and Camunda, some really modern technologies that are available to companies like Convoke, we can now take data much more easily from a third party and present it to a credit issuer so they can do this champion challenger and then make better decisions on how to pursue collection of a given consumer debt.
Yeah, being able to compare apples to apples workloads. And I'm often surprised by how little people really understand A/B testing and, limiting to a single variable and being able to measure and test on like one particular thing. I think
Yeah,
sometimes we get so excited that we're running an experiment that we try to include too many variables,
yeah,
and it really dilutes the end result, or at least the measurement of conclusion based on the end result of the experiment. That's always been a challenge in our space.
yeah. And what I'm excited about for the future is as some of these tools that you mentioned, sending emails and texts and all of those are available. How can we use that data and the consumer's behavior in response to that to make better predictions about how to pursue collecting debt? And we predict, oh, you should email this consumer, you should text this one, here's the time of day you should do that. And maybe it's for this particular asset class, but on another one it's something else.
Mhm.
And all the data I think will guide us there. And that's the really exciting part about the future here.
I think the fourth dimension of that is the content. I think, dealing with what to send them, or really like, is it a text message, an email, the cadence of things, all of that to me feels like 3D chess. I think the fourth dimension is when we have to start including in that calculation, what content are we sending them? So not only are we trying to pinpoint what, where, when, who, how, but we're now also trying to figure out what's the message that we're communicating within that individual communication. And as an industry, we've been very focused on the channels themselves and not so much on how are we going to test and perfect that content. But that
Yeah.
content, I believe, will be one of those major differentiators between organizations in the coming 3 to 5 years. Just like I would say to people, and you hear me say it fairly often, that those organizations that don't start deploying some machine learning and starting to test artificial intelligence a
Yeah.
year from now, maybe 2 years from now, it's
Yeah.
going to be 5 years to never in terms of opportunity to catch up again. So staying on that wave and not letting it crash over you, I think is really solid advice for the whole space.
It's a really important point, Adam. I was with a group of technology CEOs last night here in Washington, and with some private equity investors along in the meeting. And what they're seeing now, it's somewhat pattern matched to when the internet came in the late 90s. Remember
Mhm.
all the excitement about the internet company? Well, there's similar excitement about native AI companies. So you've got all kinds of native AI companies being created, some of them in our industry, that are going to be very innovative. So that's one track. Some of those guys will be successful, some others. Then there's companies like Convoke, where we were not traditionally native AI, but we have to move in that direction, which is your point. Like we have to do that. And so there's so many of us in the industry that are been around 5, 10, 15 years. We now have a job to do to transform ourselves.
The larger the data set, the more that's required.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? The larger the data set, the harder it is to recognize patterns, but the easier it is for the machine to do it. So the more that we can start to look at these large data sets and unleash some learning capabilities there to identify at least breadcrumbs towards the insights that we're looking for, will make a big difference.
Yeah. And look, our job at Convoke is to try to do this in a way that's safe because PII is involved, efficient, and actually better than a credit issuer can do on their own. The credit issuers are spending a lot of money on technologies and innovation. And as you pointed out earlier, they're often most of that time and energy is spent on either underwriting or servicing, maybe less on the back end. So there's opportunities for companies in our space, in the arms space, to bring real tools to the credit issuers.
Agreed. There's a lot of opportunity with the credit issuers right now. As you start thinking about what the next 5 years looks like, we're going to go through the great AI race over the next probably
Yeah.
2 years, maybe three. But what do you think the next 5 years starts to look like as we think about how rapid the world is changing today?
Well, certainly it's along the theme that we've been talking about, where since you have these data sets and they're large data sets, what AI machine learning tools can you bring to that data to help make better decisions so performance goes up, productivity goes up, and compliance goes up? And I think also bringing in external data that might be useful in that. So I think that will be a big part of the next 5 years. Then the other element I think is it's important to spend time tying into some of the credit issuer systems. They're now many more of them are digitally engaging. They're looking at, you have data from pre-charge off behavior. I think you can bring all of that into the mix as well. And I think these tools will help lower headcount on collections, audit costs, because it can be done by a machine. We can just leave aside for the second the issue of what's happening to the labor force. Okay, that's a real thing that affects real people that we need to be sensitive to. But the reality is some of this technology is just going to make costs go down, accuracy go up, efficiency climb, and collect more money.
It's a diversification opportunity for collection agencies and looking at customer service and some of the other things that do require that more labor intensive, but then you've always got that overflow skill set. As a collection agency, you're trying to build this like culture and team around you that has a particular career craft, let's call it.
Yeah.
And it's hard because as you start looking at the account to collector ratios are going up, the profitability per collector is also going up.
Yeah.
Now you have to figure out how do you start to diversify and use that workforce in new and interesting ways to
Ways.
provide additional value, because it is a craft and it's a valuable craft that I don't think will be replaced by AI anytime soon. Although we may start to see more of the administrative things, it's an opportunity to start to grow the minds of the team around you and starting to move in that direction, which, as I've started deploying artificial intelligence across my organizations, is always my focal point. Grow the people around me and teach them how to
Yeah.
use the tools.
Yeah. Well, look, even if you look over the history of Convoke over the last 15 years, there used to be a lot more human involvement in delivery of media. Now
Understatement.
we're moving millions and millions of documents around, and no human ever touches it, right? This analogy will continue into this AI machine learning world. And I
Data
think
connections.
it was all those data connections. And somebody was telling me recently about some interesting technologies where if I've got a foreign accent, there's technology that'll smooth that out so I sound like I'm from Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. What a very great idea, right? We'll just have to be careful on all the bets that we make as a managing a software company. It it's how do I allocate capital on where I want to spend my R&D efforts?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this element where you ask me what's the future like? Well, I can maybe say broadly, but do I really know? Sometimes it's hard to know. So
It's
I have to
real
be,
hard to know right now.
yeah,
It's becoming more difficult to predict because of the speed in which we're dealing with challenges. I think a lot of it, I've identified and I've written an article about 6 use cases of artificial intelligence in debt collection. That's not to say that that's specific to debt collection, not including
yeah,
HR and accounting and all of these other places where you're going to start to
yeah,
see that type of technology deployed. But pretty much everybody keeps talking to me about their use cases internally, and I keep putting them into those same 6 buckets. And understanding that structured data, that I call it scoring and kind of treatment, but it's really
yeah,
talking about like workflows and workflow engineering, I think is really where we're going to start to see that evolution over the next 5 years. It's going to be about how are we going to move these things through processes and how can we smooth out those processes and human manage the exceptions until we can learn how to automate those too. But
yeah,
that process of continuing to manually manage those exceptions, I think goes on for a long time. And when you talk about AI from a compliance standpoint, for example, being able to listen to 100% of calls instead of 5% of calls, and then a live person listens to the 5% that are
yeah,
actual exceptions, is a perfect example of using artificial intelligence and the technology at hand the right way to enhance and to refine, not to replace. Because we're
yeah,
not going to replace all the people, but we are going to be able to refine the processes and have the people's minds focused on those areas in which they add the most value.
yeah. And look, on some of those examples you just rattled off, our role in it is to get that information from the agency and law firm, and we get it every day, and present it in this business intelligence model that's easy for a credit issuer to digest and use.
Well, data's
That's
not worth anything unless you can visualize it. If you want to show me reports that are just big, long spreadsheets full of numbers, it doesn't actually help me. Looking at a dashboard, being able to visualize the information behind it and
yeah,
quickly identify the anomalies that require my attention, like that's what I'm looking for.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm excited to see the day when somebody's typing in a natural language inquiry. Hey, compare this particular credit card from this lawyer to this lawyer on this vintage on the first 30 days. Just be able to type that in and get a presentation,
I spent the
right?
last 20 years compiling a database just like that, but I can't query it in that way, right? It's still in the world of reports and trying to understand. But I agree wholeheartedly with you that I believe from a data analytics standpoint, and as more structured data comes together, those things will become more and more possible in the near future.
Yeah. I guess the other thing that I would add is we work hard, Adam, to stay focused.
Mhm.
We are particularly focused on the needs of a credit issuer. We've often been asked, "Hey, could a debt buyer or a agency or law firm use some of our services?" And it just hasn't been designed for that. And we, at least at this point in our history, we want to stay focused on the credit issuer. There's plenty of other great technology companies that can serve others. So what we do try not to be all things to all people and stay in our lane, which we think has been helpful to us and our customers over the years.
I respect that. I definitely respect that. Being able to focus like that and to grow your success in a particular channel and not be distracted by taking on every challenge or every opportunity that's presented, I can definitely appreciate and respect that focus.
Yeah, over the years, like people will say, "Hey, okay, I've captured the audio call so somebody can listen to it. Can you build technology to listen to that technology call?" And actually, I couldn't, because there's audio listening technology where people spend $100 million building it.
Yeah.
I could never create anything that good. So let's go rent that from them. So we try to do things that other people actually can't do.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Dave, I got to say, this has been an inspiring conversation. I really do appreciate you taking the time and energy to come on here and share your insights. I've learned a lot about Convoke and your storyline and kind of how things have come together. Have any additional questions you'd like to ask Dave or myself, you can leave those in the comments on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be responding to those. Or if you have additional topics you'd like to see us discuss, you can leave those in the comments below as well. And hopefully I can get Dave back at least one more time to help me continue to create great content for a great industry. But until next time, everyone, really do appreciate your time and attention. We'll see y'all again soon.